Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NECC Summer Seminar Series. My name is Ian Blanding. I'm a research analyst with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and I'm excited to have you all here so we can talk about energy codes. And this specific seminar is talking about the intersection of energy codes and utility programs. And so we've got a great lineup of speakers today to talk about that topic with you. We encourage, questions. Please put those in the question pane, throughout the presentations, and we will have a time for question and answer at the end. Just to note that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on energycodes.gov in about a week. And everyone is muted, so please make use again of that question pane as well as the chat feature in GoToWebinar. We hope that you've joined us for some of these seminars in the past. So the last one we had talked about stretch energy codes and how those can be used to address climate change. And then some of the upcoming seminars we have, we're talking about energy code implementation, energy code field studies and training opportunities, how to get to zero energy, zero water, and zero carbon, looking at offsite construction and the intersection of codes and that construction practice, and then kind of a deep dive on multifamily buildings and some of the opportunities there related to codes. And so you can find all this information on energycodes.gov/2022-summer-seminar series. And so we hope you continue to join us throughout the series here. And so without further ado, I will turn things over to Jim Myers with SWEEP to introduce the topic and as well as the panelists. So Jim, if you're online, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Ian. Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm not sure if I'm on camera. There I am. And so this is a great webinar today topic. I've been working around the utility codes space for 20 years and with utilities for over a decade now, about the opportunities that energy codes can bring to utility programs. So as Ian mentioned, there's that merging of the floor as a code and the above code programs and the advancement of the energy code over the years and how efficient the energy code has become. And so today we're going to have three great speakers I was able to bring together. And so we'll have, why don't you go to the next slide, Ian? So we have 60 minutes. We'll have Q&A. Send it in through the chat. I'll be capturing that as the moderator. Then we'll pass it along to Sharon, Rob, and George at the end after all of the panelists speak. And so that's how we'll handle that today. Next slide, Ian. Okay, here we go. So we have three great speakers. Rob's having a little challenges, and what's new with technology, it still can be a challenge for us after a good 2 or 3 years of using virtual meetings and so forth. So, but we'll have all the speakers on to give their presentation. So Sharon Bonesteel is the Building Codes Program Manager at SRP. She also works with their inverter-based resource safety team, does a lot with energy storage too for the utility. She's located in Phoenix, Arizona, and she has been working on energy codes for at the utility for nearly a decade. And then Rob Buchanan with Xcel Energy. He's the product portfolio manager at Xcel Energy, and within that portfolio, Rob has the Energy Codes program. And so Rob will be coming to us from a new program release, as Xcel Energy has started this new Energy Codes program in the state of Colorado, where I reside, and also in New Mexico. So we'll have a historical perspective with Sharon and what she'll be sharing, and then Rob and kicking off a new program. And then in the batter-up position for our panel today, we have George Chapman. He's with Energy Solutions, and he's the Associate Director for National Codes and Standards at the organization. He is located in Boston, Massachusetts, and he'll be talking to us about future program opportunities with energy codes and utilities, as they've had numerous discussions with the U.S. Department of Energy. So next slide, Ian. And also to mention that you'll hear that Ian is the driver of the slides today. So thank you, Ian, for doing that. And so many states have EERS, either the Energy Efficiency Resource Standards, that have put in place requirements for energy efficiency programs to be achieved at the utilities and through the Utility Commission. And for years, we've seen prescriptive measures that a certain amount of funding or rebate goes to a homeowner or goes to a business owner based on square footage or based on a specific product that goes in. And then we've seen Energy Star New Homes programs running for a good decade plus at utilities on the residential side. And then we have seen advanced home programs that have been coming into the utility space with the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program, FEIS, and LEED. And now energy codes and standards is becoming more prevalent in this space at the utility. So that's the amount of time. I don't want to eat up too much of everyone's time. So I'm going to turn it over to Sharon now, and send your questions in through the chat.
All right, I've successfully unmuted, so let's go to the next slide, please. So I'm from Salt River Project. We're a water and power utility, and we're also a jurisdiction in Arizona, which is a home rule state. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that means that every single jurisdiction, county, municipality determines their own building codes and energy codes. We don't have a state energy office. What I'm going to talk about today is kind of the overlook of how we established our program and some of the key learnings that we had along the path. And yes, Jim, it has been. I started at SRP in February of 2012. So it has been a decade. So next slide, please. So kind of comes down to a basic formula of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't know, everybody knows how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's easy. Okay, well, I see energy codes and utility programs as kind of, 3 or 4, 5 steps that are critical. One is make the building officials your new best friends. 2 is design your program to be fluid, capable of changing as things change or to fit the need. Have really defensible data for your claims on energy savings, and understand the value to your stakeholders of your program. And then for those of you that are allergic to nuts, we'll have kind of a attribution and cocktails kind of wrap up on this. So next slide. So make the building official your new best friend. You need the best peanut butter if you're going to make peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So, find a building official, a retired one, somebody who really understands how the jurisdictions work, how code development works, how code adoption works. What are the methods that, when I came to SRP, it was a totally different language than the code professionals were speaking. And, I was actually kind of a translator. And there's so many ways that you can connect with building officials. Every state has their building official organization. It's WABO, it's CALBO, it's ASBO, it's an organization of the building officials. They're in constant need of people to volunteer to do training, code books. I used to give out code books as incentives, and it's all about understanding the life safety issues that are related to the energy code. We still to this day have issues with some building code people who feel that energy efficiency and the energy code is not a life safety code. So we really need to help them understand the value of the codes in terms of life safety. Next slide, please. So designing your program to be very fluid is allowing yourself to understand what the focus is from the local jurisdiction, what their challenges are, what groups are in town to, create issues or assist. Become that forum to help resolve problems. When we were first doing the energy codes, most of these guys didn't even know what a blower door test was, never mind what a blower door was. So we had an event where we brought in some, raters, and we showed them how the test was run, and their response was, "Oh, is that all it is?" So a lot of times when you're dealing with some of the requirements in the code, you need to get over that hump so that they understand it's not really a big deal. One of the things we did was when we were looking at makeup air within homes is we had lots of different solutions across the valley and across the state. So we brought, one of the experts in, and we did a program on all the different ways that you could meet those outdoor air supply requirements. Everything from a bare minimum to meet the code on up to better and best, and showed them some new technology that was coming on the market that was available to help. When we brought the contractors and the raters and the building officials all together and had those conversations, that document became a tool that all the jurisdictions could use to say, "Oh, yeah, I'm looking at the plan. Yeah, that looks like option 5. Great, go." Anything you can do to simplify enforcement is necessary. So, you gotta have lots of different kinds of jelly and, preserves and that sort of thing. Approach things differently. I mean, some people even put bananas on theirs. So, next slide, please. And really, the foundation of every good peanut butter and jelly sandwich is really good bread. It's got to be strong enough to hold the materials, and it's got to not fall apart in your hands. And so the foundation for an energy code program is have really good data on what these energy savings means, what they really are. We used a lot of the documents produced by DOE that were state specific to look at the values and the energy savings and the dollar savings, and that was real important. So kind of the phase 1 was to start with the believers. Don't start with the guys that are total you'll never convince. Start with some of the believers and work through some of the program issues. And we got into a kind of a leapfrog situation with our rebates where we would be rebating at the level of the next code. And so the cities that were early adopters, they got the benefit of some of those code requirements being rebatable items. And that kind of softens the blow of getting into this thing. Yes, is it a little bit of free ridership? Maybe, but it's part of what drives that change. And you really need to have lots of education and work with your local professional organizations and participate with the national events and bring all those things together. Our board of directors established a sustainable portfolio principles. They became our guide, and these created targets of a percentage of retail requirements through non-emitting resources. And we worked with SWEEP in terms of putting these programs out there. And our energy program, codes program, eventually allowed us to count 50% credit for the savings related to those building codes and appliance standards. So next slide. Phase 2 is actually the code adoption process. You really need to understand that adoption process, whether it's at the state level or the local level. Who are the players? What are their digs? Frame those value statements to really approach things from their perspective. You know, the contractors are always going to say, this is just going to cost me more money, and this is going to make homes not affordable. Oh, some of the calculations they use are amazing, but it is from their perspective. So try to listen and educate and realize that you're representing all these people when you're talking, not just the home buyer, but you've got to look at it from other people's perspective. We actually came up with a worksheet that kind of documented at each jurisdiction the different efforts we made, whether it was training sessions, whether it was providing them code books, whether it was providing them consulting, training for inspectors. It's all about education. And then the education becomes even more important after they've actually adopted the code in terms of helping the plans examiner, helping the field inspectors resolve some of the issues that come up, and then spread that knowledge throughout that. And the last part is, of course, the attribution calculation. We actually worked with a third party to evaluate our program. They conducted a multitude of stakeholder interviews to assess our influence on their building code adoption process. We were a little nervous. I wasn't, because I knew what I had done, but ultimately the results were very positive, confirming that we had a significant impact on their process. And it's been a very cost-effective initiative, and the long-term potential is really huge. You just need to be careful of avoiding double counting with some of your other programs. Next slide, please. So understanding that value really comes down to, you know, how does it affect your Energy Star Homes program? We've had to do some little slight changes in terms of some of our rebates to not conflict with the Energy Star Homes programs, but maybe also drive them to more efficient equipment, even beyond some of the things in Energy Star Homes program. and be ready to answer those questions. How is this new set of regulations helping us sell homes? You know, if you can come up with some documents that they can hand out in their sales offices to help people understand the good stuff that they can't see when they walk through the model home. You know, a couple of our model home builders have actually done energy efficiency training with their sales staff, so that when the sales staff is walking through and they go, isn't this a lovely home? They're not just saying, look at these lovely granite countertops. They're saying, look at the windows. These are, you know, great windows, and here's the energy label on them, and what does this mean? And, you know, you can't see the insulation in the attic or the walls, but there's extra, you know, have them be able to have those conversations. And one of the biggest ones we got into was the air conditioners. And, you know, how do you tell a contractor that, you know, just putting a larger air conditioner is not the solution? You need one that's, you know, running more consistently. And so lots of those conversations you need to have. Next slide. So as simple as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Yep, make the building officials your new best friends. Have different types of jam and jelly, you know, design your program to be flexible, have defensible data, and understand the value to your stakeholders. And next slide. So if you're allergic to nuts and you want a different way to remember it, think about making a Moscow Mule. You need a talented bartender. You need fresh local ingredients. Be flexible. You know, don't stray too far from the original recipe. Have defensible data, and have non-alcoholic and alcoholic versions. So share your creations and that sort of thing. Last slide, please. If you need help, call on some of us who have been doing this for a long time. And there was a question from the audience about wishing this was a technical presentation and not a sophomoric one. So I think what you need to realize is that a lot of the individuals you're dealing with in terms of mayor and council, in terms of some of the contractors, they're not at the college master's program level. You need to be able to communicate the value of some of these programs in very simple terms, in very clear pictures and diagrams, and you have to give them easy ways to remember what they're supposed to do. I did a little 3x5 folding card that had all the key requirements and gave them out to the contractors. That became a tool, not because it was extremely technical, but because it was easy for them to use and easy for them to refer to. So remember to keep in mind who you're working with and what they need in terms of success with adopting those energy cuts. So that's my presentation, and thank you very much.
And keep sending in those questions. I'm capturing those, and we will address those after our last speaker. So now we'll turn it over to Rob, and Ian, you just keep driving the slides.
So Rob, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Okay, we can. Yes. So.
Hey. Boy, it's like being in 2012.
It's just amazing. So Rob is actually calling through a different GoToWebinar link of one of my colleagues. So glad this is working, but had to really pull out all the stops to get you online.
I have no visuals at all, so I'm going to be driving my own slides and hoping you're keeping up.
Okay.
Anyway, quick introduction. My name is Rob Buchanan. I'm the Portfolio Product Manager for Residential New Construction Programs for Xcel Energy. You know, we serve 8 states in the Midwest and in the Southeast. I run new construction in Colorado and Minnesota. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the energy codes growing pains that we've seen over the course of the last couple of years as we've launched our program. In the Colorado Energy Codes program slide, again, I'm totally blind, so I can't even tell Ian when to click past my title slide. So much like Arizona, Colorado is a home rule state, so every jurisdiction, every enforcement jurisdiction effectively has the opportunity to adopt its own energy codes. There's no state, while there's been some legislation lately that have tried to create a minimum energy code for the state, each jurisdiction still has the authority to do so. Our codes program in Colorado is not proactive, it's reactive. What that means is that we do not, in communities within our service territory, we do not knock on any jurisdiction's doors and encourage them to adopt any updated energy codes. We wait for communities to come to us and say, we're going to adopt the 2015, 2018, 2021 IECC. Can you provide us with additional information? So we go to elected officials, we'll talk to them, we'll go to city council meetings and talk about the support we can offer, what it's going to take to get to those amended energy codes. We will, if the city council does opt to adopt amended energy codes, or whichever jurisdiction, whether that's county boards or city councils, once the code gets adopted, we do target enforcement staff, builders, and architects, and other building trades to try to encourage, to help them with their code compliance and with their code adoption. So we'll be providing those inputs. And then we do have a short history of code support. So we have provided financial support for, provided some support for those communities without claiming savings. We did, and then starting with this effectively DSM plan cycle, we have adopted, we've been able to claim savings through this. So we'll go on to the next slide and talk about the New Mexico Energy Codes program. That is, New Mexico, unlike Colorado or Arizona, does have a statewide energy code. So all jurisdictions are subject to the same code. Now, New Mexico did adopt, I believe, an unamended IECC 2018 shortly after it was published. So that's where we're, so that's the baseline we're kind of working off of. But when New Mexico adopted their energy code, what we learned as we started our outreach is that the state provided very little adoption and compliance support in Xcel Energy territory in New Mexico. And that stems from our service territory in New Mexico. We have kind of the eastern third or so of the state. So we're missing the population centers of Albuquerque and Santa Fe. So it's very rural, very heavy, and very heavy on oil and gas exploration and development. So, you know, being that there aren't population centers, the state didn't elect to, or spent their resources elsewhere, excuse me. So that's the brief history of the New Mexico Energy Codes program. So I'll talk really briefly about some of our, on the next slide, I'll talk about some of our program growing pains. And we had some expected and some unexpected issues with our growing pains. The first was that we did experience some coordination issues with the state, especially in Colorado. The state has been offering code support, direct code support, statewide. So we had to coordinate between communities that were seeking code support within our service territory who we can directly help, and those and communities that aren't in our service territory that we can't necessarily help directly, because for regular, for various administrative purposes. And so we took some time and set up, obviously we're talking with the states on a pretty regular basis. We set up a mechanism for submitting questions online that routed questions from communities within our service territory our way, and let the others with the state. So that is something that I think you can expect is if you adopt Energy Codes programs. We obviously, I think, some skepticism from some local communities about what we're about what we have on the table. Are we just there to advocate for codes advancement? What specific support are we planning to provide? Are we going to come in there and destroy their housing? I mean, it's going to be a common theme. Are we going to come in there and destroy their housing markets, especially within, outside of our growth areas of our service territories, because by setting unreasonable expectations? Are we going to advocate for energy codes, for advancing energy codes, and then effectively leave them high and dry, and not provide support? Again, another risk I think we run into the growth areas and urban communities versus those that are maybe growing more slowly or have less construction. Are we going to undercommit resources there? And then I'll talk a little bit about third-party intervention a little bit later, because I've got some pretty extensive notes on that. I think a previous speaker talked a little bit about resisting third parties resisting code adoption with a very typical, I think, suite of objections around affordability and costs and things like that. What was a little bit unexpected was other third parties offering up some proposed strengthening amendments among those communities that are choosing to adopt updated energy codes. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. I do want to touch briefly on some of the unexpected growing pains. We actually had some internal resistance among our community account managers, key account managers. Every utility has slightly different names for those. But our account managers who oversee different areas of our service territory, we did see some resistance there, some lack of understanding that they were going to have something, either put on their plate that they weren't willing to defend or didn't understand completely. So, we had to do some internal ground softening among them. And, I think what we've done where that's kind of created an opportunity is through that ground softening internally, is we've become a resource for our account managers. I get pulled into conversations, codes conversations, construction conversations with all of them, and they keep us appraised of things that they're hearing that maybe we aren't privy to on the on city council agendas and things like that are a little bit unusual. So it's actually fostered a relationship with internal parties that I think a lot of DSM programs at utilities kind of struggle with, being kind of on the outside looking in. So it's created communications channels. Another thing is just getting straight up ghosted by some communities. We'll reach out, we'll ping communities who are in our service territory, and they're not even telling us they aren't interested. They just aren't saying anything. And so that was a little bit unusual to think that, we're to expect communities to go one way or another. They're going to tell us that, thanks for reaching out. We could really use your help. And so, or even just, we think we're good. We don't need your help. We aren't interested in your help. But just hearing nothing back for weeks and weeks was a little bit unusual. Touching a little bit, going into New Mexico and the genuine enthusiasm that we've seen from those underserved communities for both commercial and residential code support has been really surprising. I mean, we've seen it's not just code officials, it's builders and architects, and they want to find the pathway to get their homes compliant with their energy codes, and so that enthusiasm was a little bit was a welcome surprise. So that was something that was really interesting. And I do want to talk a little bit additional about third party intervention before I wrap up here. We do see typical resistance around affordability, but what's really interesting is that when we as the utility step in and as a counterbalancing force to some of those objections, it's unusual to have an entity at the table as strong as the utility to kind of provide counterbalancing. And then, the other thing that we kind of have to, the other challenge that we see is once energy code gets adopted, as it goes through kind of the rulemaking process, the attempts at weakening amendments, and so that's, again, that's not anything we've seen that's unexpected. We still, in Minnesota, we still have, we're still on IECC 2012, but, the most common thing that we see that I think is universal is weakening amendments around building envelope measures, which, I don't think we want to, is becoming decreasingly defensible as we start looking forward to what's going to be necessary, kind of think within the next 10 to 12 years on fuel mix. But one thing that was a little bit unexpected from the third parties was advocacy for some strengthening amendments, especially when those strengthening amendments can be interpreted kind of as counterproductive, and so counterproductive around very almost unreasonably aggressive electrification initiatives, and in some cases even advocating for gas bans, and so our challenge in those circumstances is trying to ride the edge of providing probably what I think I would consider a more sober perspective without being perceived as Luddites. And so that's where, we're still trying to figure out exactly how to approach that, because there is we're seeing it a little bit in California with their extension of Diablo Canyon's operating license, and they're not even really aggressively into electrification yet. So, I could belabor that point, but I'm not going to dwell on it for too much longer. And then the third thing that we've seen, I think, among code adoption is a little bit of an over-reliance of prescriptive versus performance-based measures in amendments, and that really kind of comes across as a little bit of a double-edged sword there, because when it comes to moving energy codes forward, there's at the beginning, generally speaking, builders just have the attitude of, just tell us what to do and we'll do it. So that is what that's perceived as is increasing the prescriptive requirements around energy codes at the sacrifice of some performance measures. But then the other side of that sword is that as builders become more skilled and time passes, there reaches a point at which that paradigm kind of shifts. And builders, as their build quality improves, they come across measures or prescriptive measures that they don't need to do because under a performance path they still qualify. But because there's a statute that requires them to do this, so the attitude flips to being something more of, I don't need to do this, but I have to because of codes. And so that can trickle down a little bit into the residents' ears who are building homes, and that's where that kind of that challenge of prescriptive of layering in prescriptive requirements in lieu of keeping performance paths runs into. That's all I've got on growing pains. After I think George goes through, we'll be open for questions. But again, I'm flying super blind, so if anybody's ping me with a bunch of questions or has anything, feel free to reach out directly to me after we're done.
You did great, Rob, and I've caught those questions for after George, and so we're going to turn the time over to George.
Great, thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. Really excited to be part of this conversation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Windows and programs and codes and programs to code. So got a couple of minutes. So just a quick caveat up here. I'm going to use the term triple pane windows throughout this. When we're talking codes or standards, we're usually talking about performance-based metrics. So if you hear me say triple pane, I really mean performance at a triple pane, like a level of triple pane performance in terms of U factors. So we don't typically like to prescribe the specific technology solution. We really like to talk about a performance metric, in this case, U factor. Just for ease of me not saying the term U factor over and over, I'm just going to call it triple pane. But please know that I'm not actually talking specifically about one technology. If manufacturers are able to meet that performance through different means, that's super. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. This is just an obligatory energy solution. So we're a mission-driven company. There's 300 of us. We've got offices all over the country. We're based initially in California. I'm out of the Boston office. We have offices in Illinois, New York, Pacific Northwest, etc. We've been doing it for over 25 years. And yeah, it's a great company. I'm really happy here. Let's go to the next slide. So we've got three major departments. Our energy efficiency department. We do a lot of program implementation. So midstream programs, and I'm going to talk about midstream quite a bit. We'll talk about that in a second. Distributed energy resources, won't be talking about that one today. And then our policy and ratings team, which does codes and standards work, including codes and standards for advocacy or technical support for standards and codes advancement on behalf of utilities. A topic I'm very passionate about and happy to talk about with anyone who might be interested. Sharon really touched on some of the topics there. It's been incredibly cost effective for the clients with whom we've worked, and we think that codes and programs can work really well together, and frankly should be. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. Let's go to the next slide. So Windows, why are we talking about Windows? Mostly because in 2006, DOE indicated that there were nationally up to 2 quads worth of energy savings potential for moving to a triple pane level of performance. They also have peak load reduction benefits. So the benefits they have are driven by HVAC, which is peak coincident. So improved envelope, improved windows actually has impacts on your peaks and can help level it out a little bit. So certainly important there, as we're seeing in many parts of the country during these heat waves. Finally, triple pane windows are very cost effective in certain applications. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is the opportunity to make them more cost effective by driving volume and helping more products, market transformation, drive down those costs. When I say they're very cost effective, I borrowed this chart here from a recent presentation from PNNL. They presented at the ACEEE summer study. It's a really great paper if anyone's interested. And this was one of my favorites. This was a series. There are 2 test houses in, I believe, Richland, Washington. Zone 5B, I believe, pretty representative of a large part of the country. And we're seeing daily energy savings in the heating season from 3 to 18%, the cooling season 23 to 41%. That may vary based on where you are in your climate, but those are pretty appealing where I come from in terms of energy savings potential. So triple pane windows, definitely really exciting. Next slide, please. So Windows programs for EE implementation certainly exist around the country. Here's an example of from a CE program summary that was out. These are standalone Windows programs. However, most of these are at the Energy Star level of performance, not at necessarily triple pane level of performance. In Canada, we actually see more programs that are geared specifically toward triple pane based on the building codes and programs there. But we have seen some Windows programs, but they're not doing exactly what we would hope they would do. So let's go to the next slide. So folks may be familiar with this graphic. This is a kind of a standard market transformation graphic. We've got your emerging technologies. There's a gap often between the development of an emerging technology and program implementation. Call that the chasm. Accelerated development can be necessary to get you over the chasm. Then you've got the program implementation that leads to codes and standards, and ultimately it can lead to things like federal model codes. So that's sort of the typical process that we often use when we talk about market transformation. So where are we with Windows? So with Windows, we've got research and funding for what are called thin triple pane windows through DOE and some of the national labs. Triple pane windows, the more conventional ones, can be a little heavier. The thin triples, the objective is to make the installation easier, a little lighter, with the same energy savings benefits. So there is some research and development on the product side. Then on the program implementation side, I mentioned the states that have standalone Windows programs. And if you're doing Windows and it wasn't captured, I apologize. Or it might be part of a whole house program, a larger retrofit Energy Star performance program, something like that. However, the market penetration for the triple pane windows at the moment is roughly 3%. So we are just at that cusp of the program implementation side. It's not very widely adopted. We don't have a lot of scale. And because of that, the cost effectiveness isn't necessarily great and the capacity isn't necessarily great. We're not having these at bulk. You can't necessarily get them off the shelf kind of thing because they're at 3%, a little more niche right now. And so in terms of where we are with the codes, to my knowledge, they're not in the codes. And one of the real challenges there isn't that they wouldn't make sense, or the technology isn't out there, they might not be cost effective. In a lot of cases, it's because there's not enough market adoption. There's not enough product out there. 3% is, even for a stretch code, 3% can be a little uphill for getting into a stretch code. So we got a product, it saves a lot of energy, it's really promising, it's not ready for codes and standards yet. This is traditionally a place where we're looking for program implementation. So let's talk about what we might be able to do there. Next slide, please. So midstream programs. Midstream programs are awesome. Midstream programs are really targeted. They're particularly great for these types of products. Like a refrigerator, customers have real strong opinions about refrigerators. They go and buy them themselves. Windows, you're often buying what the contractor is recommending to you. They can strongly influence the sale. And so in this case, working directly with those contractors or the distribution channel, and it can look a little different from Windows than other products. You don't necessarily have a standalone distributors, might be a lumber yard, might be direct from manufacturer. But those folks in the supply chain, you're working with a smaller set. There's a lot of customers out there. There are fewer contractors, there are fewer manufacturers. So you can have bigger impacts working more efficiently with the folks who are driving the purchase decisions. And if you run a midstream program, you can design it so that it's an instant rebate situation. So they are getting the cost decrease, the cost benefit for upfront at the time of purchase. It's not like, well, you spend it and then you fill out the form and you send it in, and you know, you get a rebate 6 months later. It's the customer is seeing the benefit immediately. Typically, the market really likes these types of programs. It helps them drive adoption of products that frankly can be more profitable for them, and can make it more affordable for their customers. It helps them upsell, and they, across all of the types of programs we implement, whether it's food service or HVAC or water heating or what it might be, lighting, midstream programs are tremendously successful at driving market transformation, typically far more successful than a similar downstream program. And for a nascent technology, where you're 3% like a window, midstream program is really a home run. That's something that can get you from that 3% to that 25% a lot faster than a downstream program is necessarily going to be able to do. And that's what's going to be able to drive your code adoption. So I got one more slide where I want to talk about that handoff. So midstream programs can really help improve codes. Now, typically the process is, for that market transformation process, you run the program and then somebody else deals with the code. However, to implement the code, you need to understand what the market looks like in a given state or territory, right? And you need to understand the cost. You need to understand how the market looks. You need to understand the cost effectiveness. You need to understand the installation practices. You need to understand sort of prevailing practice in the field. You have to give a relationship with the contractors and the installers, so that when you have a code, you're already working with them and you can help support them through it. Give them the training and education they might need. Take into account any local considerations. If you do a program to code approach where your midstream program is already thinking about your ultimate code, you can be collecting that information while you run your program, building those relationships, and actually having a seamless handoff from the program to the code, so that the code reflects local practice and the local market and is informed by it. So the code is better and more tailored for your area and is building directly off of the work that the programs have done that have helped lead to the market transformation. So the program is getting the full credit for the work they're doing. They're transforming the markets, making the code possible. It's all about connecting those dots through sort of a program to code approach. We're in a great place with Windows because, again, we're kind of on the front end of it. We can implement this type of approach if we're thinking about it thoughtfully. So Energy Solutions, working with a lot of clients on thinking about launching Windows programs. We want to tie them to codes, and really excited about the opportunity. Next slide is just my contact information, and really would love to chat with anybody who wants to talk Windows, program to code, codes, anything like that. Always willing to. Greatly appreciate it, and hope I didn't take too much of my time here. Got a couple of minutes from QA, it looks like.
And we do. Thank you, George. Great. Thanks. I have captured a number of the questions here, and I'll capture this last one here and put it in the mix. So let's start off here with a question. And so the question is, I'm not entirely clear on what support Excel offers, like what was mentioned. Can you explain when a community, at the community level, Rob, what, when it's community level does, can you explain when a community does accept support from Excel, what the process looks like? So when a community accepts support from Excel.
Sure. Yep. So our codes program is vendor driven. So we have a vendor who goes in and provides either on-site training or virtual training. So we work with the state as part of coordinating with the state. We work with the state to do a webinar series. Every Wednesday, there's a standing meeting where people from all across the state can come in and learn about a specific topic. if communities have outreach about specific parts of the energy code they're complying with. We had an example where there was a builder who was struggling to achieve the ACH requirements of their code, and so we will do some direct intervention with builders when they have specific issues they're trying to work their way through. We talk about, so we have, I think I would say it's multifaceted, and that will provide general information about the required measures and what we want to see, what's expected to comply with those measures. But then we will provide some direct support for code officials, what to look for during a design review, and how to coach the builders on how to amend their designs if there's issues with them, and architects will help them work their way through their designs and how to the required MLS to make those compliant, and then direct the builders to up to and including some direct training, some direct intervention, some on-site stuff. So I hope that provides some clarity around that question.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, next question will go to George. Question is, you mentioned you. So when you mentioned the role that the implementers and the midstream programs, who is you? Is that the manufacturer? Is that the implementer? Would that be the utility?
So typically the programs that we implement tend to be on behalf of investor-owned utilities, but they can also be on behalf of a statewide program, a federal program, an outfit like NYSERDA. It really depends on the funding. In a lot of states, it's energy efficiency dollars that go towards energy efficiency improvement. So a midstream windows program could certainly just be a utility program. We believe that utilities have a role to play in helping support the development of codes and standards. Some of our clients are utilities that are able to do that. We think it's really beneficial when there is an explicit tie between the programs and the codes, and the utilities are involved throughout. It tends to be they don't actually get credit for it when they should be. So we certainly work with folks who are able to, or are trying to be able to, fully capture the market transformation benefits they're providing through their programs, whoever they might be, to get credited for that work, and really to tie it directly to those codes to help make the codes better. Okay,
thank you, George. I think we have time for one last question, and this I'll send to Sharon. The policy issues that play in this space, you're not an IOU at SRP, but you're a large utility in the state of Arizona, like a typical IOU. And so, what policy issues were the largest impact in determining the utility program, where how much you could invest in training and other resources to support builders and building officials and so forth?
I'm not sure I totally understand your question.
Yeah. So So in the Q&A, there's an implementer. This person works for an implementer of both utility, new construction, and utility codes programs. And they mentioned that the policies play a huge role in determining what utilities can invest in technical training and other resources. And so can you share briefly on those policy roles, whether it came down from the leadership at SRP or your management, or was it all, I'll call it ground up from the users, from the code officials, from the builders?
Well, SRP is very vested in the energy efficiency programs, not only because our customers have told us that they want us to be engaged in these programs in this process, but also from the standpoint of resource planning. We have discovered that energy efficiency is a resource, and the more we have new communities built to these codes and standards, the better off we are in terms of the design of feeders to those communities in terms of their load on our system. So, you know, we look at being able to work with customers to have more resilient homes, more protection against the elements. Certainly in Arizona, we deal with extreme heat that can kill people. And making sure that people can afford their utilities, part of it is making sure that the structure is well insulated and that the mechanical units are very efficient. You know, it is a life safety issue. We've had people die in structures where they didn't have a good air conditioner, or the home was very insufficiently insulated. So it is a life safety issue. I'm going to ask them to put in the chat a link to a really good article, actually on the SWEEP webpage, about energy codes as life safety codes. And the author, Christine, I think made a really good statement in, you know, the energy code fundamentally improves the durability of buildings as well as the health and safety of the humans inside. You know, the energy code affects the moisture management, rot, mold, mildew, indoor air quality, fire safety, extreme weather protection, and resiliency of homes and buildings. So it works in tandem with other model building codes to ensure safe buildings. So I'll ask them to put that link to that article. It's a great article, and we have found working on the energy codes program has done many things for our utility in terms of load management and other things. So
muted. So I think we're at time. Ian, is that correct? I want to check with you.
That is correct. Yeah, we're at time. I did drop a link into the chat if you're requesting a certificate of attendance to self-report for ICC or AIA CEUs. So please click that link, and then we will get you that certificate. And then I will drop the link that Sharon provided or discussed about energy codes or life safety codes. So I just included that in the chat as well, so you have access to that before we sign off here. But really appreciate everybody for attending today. You know, hopefully you can join us in 2 weeks, so September 22nd, where we're going to talk energy code implementation, and then also for the rest of the seminars in the series. And so with that, just thanks to our moderator, Jim, and our great set of panelists. Apologies for the technical difficulties, but we did eventually prevail here. So thanks again for attending, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.